Hi, I'm Dr. Josef Witt-Doerring, a board-certified psychiatrist specializing in identifying and treating psychiatric adverse drug reactions. Today, I'm speaking with Marchello, a college student who developed severe akathisia after starting psychiatric medications. If you want to learn more about the lived experience of akathisia or need resources to share with a loved one, this interview will be invaluable. Marchello powerfully articulates his experience with akathisia and his frustration with the medical system's response. Later in the interview, Marchello and his mother Lisa provide critical insights into how akathisia has affected their family dynamics, offering advice on navigating the caregiver and drug-injured relationship. Now, let's go hear from Marchello. Hi, I'm Dr. Josef Witt-Doerring. Today I'm joined by Marchello and his mother Lisa. Today we're going to be talking about antidepressant injuries today, resulting in severe akathisia that's lasted for quite some time. And so, Marchello, I'd like to start with you. Tell us, how did you end up taking antidepressants in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks for also just meeting us where we are. It's really important that you're giving people this platform to share these stories. So basically, I, as a teenager, had some anxiety, some panic that was situational and, ended up remitting, ended up just sort of resolving on its own. I got to the end of high school. We live in a small city in Oregon, and there's a lot of easy access to nature and a culture here of just basically anything to do with the outdoors. So that's kind of where all of my passions are is outdoor activities, hiking, photography, mountain biking for a period. So I got to the end of high school here and decided I wanted to make basically just a big change, try something completely new. I applied to the New School in Manhattan, got accepted on some scholarships and decided to go. Basically, making a very long story short, the city itself was a variable that I hadn't considered the difficulty of. I'm a very resilient person and very resourceful, and basically just coming from a place like we live now, where there's all of this amazing access to nature, to a place like New York, where I have to go to the Hayden Planetarium to see the night sky. That was wearing on me sort of more than I was willing to admit, and that was causing a lot of kind of inner dissonance and anxiety and stress. And also I just wasn't in the right program at school and needed to make some changes there. So, at some point in there, I decided to take a leave and do some traveling. I really firmly believe that, after 12 years of school, a person should not just basically be thrust into more school. I think it's just this idea in the States and elsewhere that you don't want to break that momentum. So initially I didn't take a gap year. Once I was a year in at school, I really needed to. I've been working at a sort of like a natural history store and saved up some money and decided to go do that and do some backpacking and traveling with friends in Europe and just hiking and kind of doing things that I've always wanted to do but didn't have the chance up until that point. Got to the end of that, was really great experience, and I was sort of feeling like I knew my time in New York was kind of at a close, like I wasn't going to be thriving there. So in the back of my mind, I just sort of put New York away and decided that I probably wasn't going to go back. And this time my parents are moving back to LA, where we had lived, for the first few years of my life. And so the logical step was to basically just go back to LA and kind of be with them and be with friends and family that we have there, and sort of like help them get situated, and also kind of figure out what my next step would be. And in that time, I'm experiencing very situationally appropriate kind of anxiety and stress, basically just around trying to figure out what my next step was going to be, and kind of how daunting it is to reapply for school. And so, all of that was wearing on me. At the time, a lot of my friends had been helped by psych meds, antidepressants, used for anxiety, not so much not depression. So it was something that I've always been pretty adamantly against in my mind. We're not quick to kind of a Western cure, or we're sort of. It was always something that I knew that I probably was never going to do. And, I didn't really understand why I felt that way. I just knew that I felt that way, basically. So I see a psychiatrist in LA with an open mind. Comparatively, I was in a vulnerable place, and the psychiatrist was very sort of scientifically minded, and kind of met me where I was, and spoke to concerns that I had. And I do remember explicitly bringing up my concerns and asking about side effects. And essentially I was just assured that I could expect some weight gain. I'm a pretty lanky person, so it seemed like, okay, that sounds manageable. Definitely in my mind, my thinking was, this is, something that I can try and stop and come away from unscathed. At the time I had no understanding that such a short amount of time on these meds can cause such long-term or permanent injury. It wasn't even, you don't hear of any drug causing harm like this. You hear of alcohol, things like, illegal drugs and alcohol causing long withdrawal, but it wasn't on my radar that this was even possible. And so I listened to the psychiatrist who recommended that I try Cymbalta, which is one of those SNRIs, kind of similar to an SSRI. And I took that for 8 days. And on the 8th day, I was hiking in Big Sur with my closest friend. And there's some confusion about exactly what happened. I think I had missed a dose and basically gone back to take that dose, and had an adverse reaction that, I think about today, and it sends chills down my spine how severe of an adverse reaction it was. It was essentially as if the toxicity of the medication had accumulated in my body and detonated like a nuclear bomb or like napalm, something, I knew something incredibly damaging had happened. It wasn't like, I was experiencing something like a side effect. It in the back of my mind, it felt incredibly injurious, and I just knew that I knew that whatever was happening was probably linked to the drug.
Marchello, if I may just ask some questions. Was this building up at all during those 8 days, or was it like it just hit you like a ton of bricks, like in one moment? Yeah,
there was a bit of a slow build. Things that were so sort of horrifying and foreign to me. I've always been, I've always felt like my nervous system is almost calibrated with nature, and not in a hokey way, but in like a, when I'm out under a night sky and I'm looking up, there's a real connection. And, a real sense of like scale and space and kind of where I am in that. And I remember a few nights before this real adverse reaction, I was with my closest friend. We were on a beach and we were stargazing. And I just remember feeling utterly detached from the feeling of grandeur and connectedness that I was so used to looking up. It was really disturbing, and in hindsight, I can look back on that as kind of like the first clue that something was about to be very wrong. Of course, I'm not at that point. I'm not connecting it to the medication. It's just your mind does all of this rationalization and sort of like mental gymnastics to kind of almost like pretend like it's not happening, or like there isn't like a slow build of injury or toxicity until the 8th day when it did all hit me like a ton of bricks. And
if you could just take us back to that moment. I know you said it was napalm. Can you describe it in whatever way you can remember that gives me a sense of what was happening? What were you feeling in your body? What was happening to you mentally? What was it like when it sort of showed its full form to you that day?
Yeah. So, we've been doing some hiking the days before. I was noticing that, I couldn't anything strenuous, like hiking up a hill in the heat or something as we were doing was, causing this kind of dizziness and vertigo, and sort of like my vision was kind of going out. And this is something that did on the 8th day when I had the adverse reaction. We were hiking to the top of this trail, and it was pretty hot, and it was a pretty good grade, the hill. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is strange. Like I'm usually really strong and can do this and not feel like, I need to like stop every 5 seconds and catch my breath. And so we get to the top of the trail, and it was like all of the sensory input, and the fact that I was just like, in strenuous activity, it just accumulated. And, it could have been like, when your blood gets going and your circulation gets going, maybe the medication was just making its way all over my body really quickly or something. I remember getting to the top of the overlook and feeling like, in movie scenes when someone's being poisoned. I'm thinking back to, there's a James Bond scene where he's basically getting poisoned inside of a casino. And it was a lot like that. It was just like, I feel like I'm being killed. Vertigo, completely dizzy, nauseous, just almost like my vision is blacking out. And at that point, we're saying, okay, let's go down. Something's wrong. And on the way down, that's the very first time that I experienced classic akathisia. Just all of a sudden, like I'd just been hooked up to a car battery or something, very electrical, very frantic, elements of panic, but also completely unrelated to panic that I've experienced. And I've experienced some really severe panic anxiety. So like I said, your mind sort of, does somersaults. You're kind of thinking like, oh, is this just like worsening anxiety? We get back to the car, and the next 8-hour drive, it was like 6 or 8 hour drive to the closest emergency room in San Luis Obispo. And during that time, that was the most harrowing 8 hours of my life. If I was alone, if I hadn't had her there with me, I don't want to think about what might have happened. I was in such a state of confusion and shock that I, calling for an ambulance or something like that would have just been impossible. I was like essentially nonverbal. I was like so locked in by just the degree of suffering that was happening. We're like passing store. This is Highway 1 in Big Sur. So we're like passing little convenience stores and, she's running in and grabbing Gatorade and things like that. Nothing is touching it. I'm drinking a ton of water. We have a bunch of food. It's not like a blood sugar thing or anything like that. I remember I was having really severe liver, like lower back pain, which, in hindsight sounds a lot like liver toxicity. And I'm in full akathisia. And of course I know nothing about akathisia. I don't know the word akathisia, so I don't know to move. So I'm sort of just locked up with, 10,000 volts coursing through me on, in a closed circuit, just feeding back into each other. I'm like gripping the sides of the car, just, in just the highest degree of medical emergency that I can possibly imagine. We finally make it to the ER. By then I think to, have the presence of mind to bring the medication in with me. And, of course, no one there had any, inclination to believe that it was the medication. They basically suggested that it was like heat exhaustion, which at that point, it kind of subsided some. I could tell that there was injury, something was very wrong, but it wasn't as severe. Getting out of the sun and being sitting and not having so much sensory input was kind of bringing it down a bit. And I knew that this heat exhaustion idea that they basically had at the ER was just like, okay, let's get out of here and figure this out on our own, sort of thing. From that point, it's basically just not as severe as that. I think at that point I just stopped taking the medication. It was 8 days. We get back to LA. We go back to the psychiatrist. At that point, I'm not stabilized. I know something's very different and very wrong. The psychiatrist, of course, knew nothing about adverse reactions or anything. And, she was throwing around all kinds of diagnoses and just things that I knew just from intuiting were so wrong. This is so early that we don't have any of the vocabulary that we do now to describe anything. So we're just kind of feeling our way around in the dark, trying to figure out what had happened. And
tell me what happens next in this phase. I mean, you've been hurt and you're starting to make sense of everything. Yeah, what happens next in the story?
Yeah, so I'm still not entirely, realizing that it was the medication. For some reason, there's like just some crazy rationalization that goes on because no one is giving you hints that it could be the medication. And, unless you're really digging around for that information, it's not just made available to you. It had subsided some, the initial kind of akathisia and just like the acute toxicity had subsided some. For some reason, she says, let's stop this medication and, let's try Prozac. I can't think back to why I didn't kind of put my foot down and say, wait, hang on a second. Like, this is very clearly related to the medication. I can't make sense of my thought process then. this doctor is someone who really spoke to all of my scientific questions and sort of like concerns, and was very reassuring, and had the typical just like wall of degrees and Stanford trained, tons of experience, books on every conceivable psychiatric and medical thing. She starts me on low dose Prozac, and it's like, I think it's like 2.5 milligrams, because she's wary of, if this was related to the medication, let's start you slow. I don't know why I agreed. 2 weeks into that, it was kind of another slow build again, just an accumulation of toxicity. And again, it was like, one afternoon to an evening, I was in full blown akathisia. Are you remembering something?
I was with him then. We were in Portland. We were at a friend's house, and he went into, from the outside, a level of anxiety I had never seen before. And he started pacing and could not stop moving. And I called the psychiatrist. She'd always been very available, very accessible, easy to talk to. And I described what was happening, and that he was pacing, he couldn't stop, severe anxiety. And she said to me, "Gee, that sounds like akathisia." And I mention this because it's going to be...
And that's the first time I hear the word.
That's the first time we heard the word.
And, of course, I get on Google and just look up the word akathisia, and it is like, to a T, it's what I'm experiencing. It's very clear to me at that point that this is not, it's not anxiety. It's not panic. It's not anything that I've ever experienced in any capacity. It's totally brand new and 1,000 times worse than the worst panic anxiety. I can't remember the exact timeline after and kind of like the minutia, but I definitely got off the Prozac. We at that point, I'm basically just accumulating injury, and all of the, the injury from the adverse reaction is almost like catching up to me, which I now sort of understand as like this kind of tardive effect of kind of, initial insult and then a delayed onset of more consistent symptoms. I'm at that point, I'm adamant that like, SSRIs are like not for me. We go back to the same psychiatrist who, at this point I'm basically trying to stay off like Google, because what I'm reading is horrifying and matches exactly what's happening. We go back to her, and she prescribes benzodiazepine, basically just as needed. Of course, we know now in hindsight that that's the opposite of helpful to start on a benzo. I'm taking it as needed. I'm taking it, I think like a quarter twice a day or something like that. I know nothing about tolerance and, the fact that you're not supposed to take it for more than 2 weeks. I think I took it for about a month or 2 months. At this, during this time, it's just more of the same. It's difficult because I'm someone who's very like aware of my own body and like cognizant that if something is like a no-go for me, that's what you stay away from. For some reason, it's so terrifying in the beginning and so shocking and so different and just brand new. I was taking the Xanax because I was in fatal agony. And, it was the only thing that was taking the edge off of the akathisia. And in there somewhere, you start to think like, oh, maybe it is anxiety. If this anxiety drug is taking an edge off of it. Mm-hmm. Still though, it's there constantly, even if I had just taken one of these benzo pills. So, it's difficult for me because I hear people talk about having the presence of mind to like not, once they have an adverse reaction, to not touch any other category of drug that's similar. You do what you have to do in the moment, because it is moment to moment. And, after a month and a half of Xanax, I had accumulated more injury from that. And essentially what happened was the effect flipped. It became paradoxical completely. It's really it's distressing to think back on just how insidious it all is, and how it all just happens sort of right under your nose. And, at the time I needed that help from the benzo, which was just adding so much insult to injury and just putting me deeper and deeper into toxicity and injury. And, at the end of the month and a half of that, it was another sort of, sudden flip. I would take it and I would be in level 10 akathisia and in intense burning pain, like burning scalp, burning skin, almost like your skin has been removed, or like the protective layer on your nerves just gets removed and you're just this raw nerve. We're in communication with a psychiatrist at this point, and of course I knew nothing. I wasn't in any support groups yet. I wasn't listening to other people's experience. She decides to taper me off over like a week. Was it a week?
It was 7 days. Her taper was 7 days. To get off the benzos. And
my understanding was that was slow. And, that was, a careful reduction. Once I was clear, that's when all hell broke loose. That's when I really hit the floor. I'm having almost like stroke symptoms. I was driving across town in LA from Silver Lake to the Pacific Palisades, where there's some hiking trails. And I was kind of doing that and doing that more and more and more. And, kind of slow burn, needing to be moving, needing to be outside, needing to not be in confined indoor spaces. And then we do this rapid taper, and, I couldn't be behind the wheel of a car. It was, something that I've always done utterly effortlessly. And, just complete sensory input explosions every second, trying to do anything like that. At that point, light and sound are just like knives. It's like, you can't, the darkest sunglasses, I use these now. They're basically ski goggles. Nothing you do, you can't put earplugs in, you can't block it out. It's just every ounce of sensory input into your nervous system is just pure torture. It's the worst hangover times 10,000. And I'm, I think I started to get into, I'm having stroke symptoms. I'm like falling over onto the floor and just abject agony and terror. At this point, I'm really putting two and two together. I'm like, okay, it's psych meds. It's psych meds on the whole. I'm pretty sure we tried reinstating a pill of the benzo or something, and it was just total opposite effect, that, you know, it was like a stimulant. It was like eating poison. I mean, it just flared everything so sky high.
Can I talk about the last visit to the psychiatrist? Yeah. We had not met in person. This was his therapy, but my husband and I went for the first time to see her, because when the day after the last 1/16th of the benzo, again from the outside, he was never the same. To me, that's when I could see a severe and very, very frightening change. We went back to the psychiatrist, and she said, well, you can't get akathisia from an antidepressant. You can get it from an antipsychotic, but it doesn't happen with an antidepressant. And I mention this because this was also the beginning of a very Kafkaesque journey of psychiatrist after psychiatrist. And I mentioned to you that in that phone call, she had told me, gee, this sounds like akathisia. But when we saw her again, she was very different. And she said, you can't get it. You can't get akathisia from an antidepressant. I think this is somatic.
And at this point, I'm presenting pacing and writhing back and forth. Like I look like I've been set on fire.
It looked like a horror movie. And he was trying to explain to me what was going on. And I have a video on my phone, which I wanted to show the psychiatrist. This was a different Marchello. So she thought it was somatic and suggested that we get a second opinion. Can I move it forward a little bit? At the same time, she was not seeing him, but she was prescribing things over the phone. Is it
propranolol? It was like the standard of care, sort
Misra, something or other.
No, you're thinking of mirtazapine. She wanted to prescribe mirtazapine.
Yeah, she wanted to, but she didn't. So, no. But a couple of things, even though she was not seeing him, she prescribed.
Yeah. And the propranolol, I took one pill of the propranolol, and it was like, it was like just back to the same poisoning, just clear that it wasn't going to do anything at that point. And, somewhere in there, we had tried another, quarter pill of his Xanax, total opposite effect. So it's like something happens in your nervous system, in your body. It, similar to like just building up an allergy to something, I guess, is the only way to compare it. Things have the complete opposite effect that you would expect them to have. And somewhere in there, as we were making the rounds to all these different psychiatrists and specialists and having to be in the backseat of the car, just like with a blindfold on, in a torture chamber
across the traffic in LA.
No two psychiatrists would have the same response.
But they were all willing to give him something. The second psychiatrist wanted to give him Abilify, and I said, isn't that some sort of antipsychotic? He's not. He said, no, he's not psychotic. And I thought, well, why do you suggest a drug for psychosis?
All drugs that just have the effect of putting a person deeper and deeper into injury.
But he didn't take the drug.
No, at that point, I was so adamant that I wasn't going to be taking any medication.
So we went to psychiatrist number 3. Do you want to talk about that, or do you remember?
Yeah. So I can't remember how we found this person. This was like someone in the upper echelons of the LA psychiatry world or something, very well connected and kind of like a researcher. And we went to him, and immediately, I'm gauging the look on his face and sort of his body language. It's clear that he understands what I understand at that point. He says, this is absolutely akathisia. And there is one thing on planet Earth to cure it. And it was Clozaril, which is just basically just like one of the most toxic antipsychotics. At this point, it's sinking into me how utterly alone we are and how there is absolutely no help for this 24/7 emergency of proportions that I cannot begin to explain. When that,
I was going to say, Marchello, how old are you when all of this is happening?
21. Yeah.
So you're 21. You have a debilitating neurological condition. You just go and see one of the top psychiatrists, the third one in LA, and it's just dawning on you that they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, seeing him.
But he validated him. He said he absolutely has akathisia. And he said to me, you better treat this right away. He admitted it was the worst suffering of any suffering he had seen in any patient, and that there was a very high incidence of suicide. So he recommended that that Marchello stay for a month in his clinic, in which he told me was very nice and had a pool, and that he was so nice he would put his own daughter there. These are the little details that, will go in my play, because it's crazy making, it is a wild ride through the psychiatry, profession. And when Marchello went back and looked up the side effects of, was it Clozaril?
Yeah, akathisia is at the very top.
At the top.
So that was the point. That was the point for me where, and you can't really ever go into panic. You have to just stay unbelievably strong for yourself. You have to, it is just clawing through moment to moment. So I couldn't panic. It was just, okay, what are we going to do? We've been through the ringer with psychiatry. Clearly, psychiatry does not have an answer. I remember explicitly this psychiatrist was trying to explain to me that this was a dopamine problem, as he put it. And he took out his sketch pad and drew the most crude drawing of a synapse and drew some little circles. And I just remember thinking, this person has absolutely no concept of what has happened to me. This is probably something that he spent 10 minutes on in med school. He probably understands it to be a movement disorder, because that's how it's defined by, just the medical establishment. So that was when just pure dread set in, and just like, okay, I'm, this is what it is. This is where we are. There's no treatment. And I'm just going to have to go home and try to survive. And we're still here 5 years later. There has been basically no change. Some change in the intensity, just in the sense that, in the very beginning, there was acute toxicity. And some of that has subsided, but obviously there's enormous injury left behind. I have absolutely no life. If we did not live in the center of a small, quiet, familiar community, I would have, it would be, unthinkable to, imagine trying to live in a city or, be somewhere where, it was noisy, or, have to be a single mom and rely on taking care of kids, or there are a million scenarios that I can, imagine other people in this going through and feeling some gratitude there that, okay, at least I'm not dealing with all of those secondary complications. But, Yeah, it's impossible daily. Nothing we've tried has helped. We've tried everything. We've tried things that make absolutely no sense to try. Hyperbaric oxygen, everything from Western meds to homeopathy, basically. Everything has had an effect of exacerbating some aspect of this. It's totally unbelievable. And
I want to ask, so there is so you get to this point where you've given up on psychiatry, they haven't been able to help. When I've talked to other people, usually there's a moment where usually it's when they go online, and it's almost like the red pill moment where you realize you're not alone. And in fact, there's, tens to hundreds of thousands of people going through this as well. People kind of forgotten by mainstream medicine, sort of pushed to the fringe. Was there a moment like that for you where you became acutely aware that you had been, that you were not alone in this, and that you were part of this unfortunate group of people who had been damaged and sort of tossed aside by psychiatry? And if so, when did that hit you? When did you fully realize what club you were in?
Yeah, pretty early on. And it's not, there's, for me at least, there was absolutely no comfort in knowing that other people are going through this. There's a man named Josh Jensen. He and his wife do a lot of activism. He has a YouTube channel. He was one of the first people that I found and, resonated with, that we had the same caliber of injury. It's of no comfort. I mean, there's no oh, great, other people are going through this with me sort of thing. It's just horror, really, to imagine, anyone in my life going through this. I mean, of course, in the very beginning, I was, posting a lot in the groups and asking a lot of questions. And I think it's just the natural, it's just what happened. You can't help it. You have to be in the groups. You have to be searching for this answer that, probably doesn't exist. It's just really comparing notes and I
think it was, from the outside again, it was validating. Because people were saying, yes, this happened to me. And yes, this is akathisia. I've had these symptoms. They did share information, especially, caution in terms of taking more meds and supplements.
Yeah. I think had I not had the information from the groups of, just to be able to see that written down from other people who have tried to go the route or trusted the standard of care of more medications to fix a problem caused by medications. It sounded absurd to me, but you're so utterly desperate that you consider everything. And that moment of realization where you realize there is absolutely no quick way out of this. I was basically able to intuit from very early on that, my injury was incredibly injurious and that I would probably be in this for a long time if I could make it. I have no advice to give about how to make it other than just to do whatever it is that you have to do, and just allow anything and everything to yourself, the smallest of things, just to literally just pull your way through moments. I think a lot about pre-internet era psych med injury and what that looks like, and what that has looked like for people who did not have the validation of hearing other people tell exquisitely similar stories. I think without that, and without, people like you that are doing this kind of work, I think back to the 80s and 90s when these drugs were basically just, thrown out into the world. I can't imagine anything more devastating than having had this happen to you during those early years before the internet. You hear stories of family members just getting so incredibly frustrated, and people, spouses and friends and family who people have previously had very close relationships with. There's like this effect of just like some people just cannot hear this. And, in the days before the internet and before all of these open lines of communication and groups and channels like yours, I can't imagine what that must have been like. There's few people that you hear of kind of on the wind who, before the internet had very severe injuries like this. And, I don't know what to say about those people. Superhuman. Doesn't even begin.
Do you want to?
Marchello? Oh, sorry, Lisa, you go.
No, I just want to, I have the timeline, and
You're out of the frame.
do you want to say anything else about LA, or are you jumping to Oregon? Do you want to talk about anything else in that time period?
Other than just to kind of, it's hard. The appropriate response in the beginning of this, whether it's you or whether it's a family member or a friend, is to go around to every doctor, to hear every opinion, every doctor that we visited thought that they were the answer, basically, or that they had absolute knowledge. The doctors that I spent 10 minutes with, who I have not known them their entire lives, they have not known me their entire lives, to say that something like this is somatic, the damage that does to support systems, it enrages me to a point. I can't even think about it, because some family members are, they will trust the doctors above what their loved one is saying, because it's easier to, hear a doctor say, here's this answer. It's an antipsychotic, with the highest possibility of causing akathisia. It's insanity. And, during that time, your worldview comes crashing down, because, before this, obviously I had to trust psychiatry enough to agree to try the medication. So, it just erodes your trust in everything, in institutions and, professionals. I have such a different take on what it means to be a professional now, and what it means to, have a medical degree and basically be closed off to any other information.
I want to segue and actually ask you a little bit about your life now. If you could share maybe what a day looks like for you, maybe a bad day, one where you're having more symptoms, just so I and the audience can get a sense of what kind of damage this is still caused you. Yeah,
there is definitely up and down. It's described as windows and waves. I think there should be better terminology. Most days at this point, it's constant akathisia to varying degrees, and it takes on so many different. There's so many different manifestations of akathisia. Also, all all manifestations of akathisia just basically involve just needing to tear out of your skin just the most unnatural feeling, just like almost like a perversion of nature. It's incredibly violent, inward turmoil, dysphoria, sometimes accompanied with these just incomparable to anything else, electrical, the closest comparison I can draw is like if, really severe akathisia is like if you were to just be repeatedly doused with oil, like really hot oil out of a fryer, minus the heat. Like someone's just chasing you around, dashing you with oil. There's no movement, doesn't help. And you'll hear anyone with akathisia describe that movement doesn't help. It's just necessary. It's like touching something hot, and your body's natural response is to recoil and pull your arm away. It's just that on an infinite loop, to varying degrees. I should mention that as a byproduct of my injury, I've also developed non-24. It's a circadian rhythm disorder that, just based on my research, only affects people who are completely blind or who have really severe brain injury. So what that means is essentially my circadian clock, my roughly 16 hour awake window, moves forward every single day 1 to 4 hours. So, right now I'm awake mostly during daylight hours. It'll slowly be shifting, over the coming days, and then I'll be completely nocturnal. I haven't met anyone else in the psych med injury world who also has non-24. So it's just, something that's curious to me.
So you can't make an appointment. Like, that's why we had to keep shifting the time with you, because he was nocturnal. You can't make a doctor appointment. You can't do anything in advance because we don't know whether he'll be sleeping or, and also he spends a lot of nights alone. He'll often get up at 10 o'clock at night, and he's alone from 10 to 8 in the morning when we get up. And it's really difficult to describe. And I have, people have a hard time sort of like understand. I usually have to explain it really in depth, but it's like, I can't control it. It's like if you were to ask someone with a normal circadian clock to adjust to this circadian clock, it would just be like ridiculous. It's just what happens when your brain gets injured in a specific way, I guess. I mean, I don't know enough about it, but I do know that, on its own, it's its own separate, life-altering, seemingly permanent, there is no, there's no cure for it. And there's no, I've looked into it. It's described as a chronic or lifelong condition. On its own, it's horrific and life destroying and soul killing and all of those things. And then, tack on constant akathisia and pain so extreme I can't even really begin to describe it. Almost pain plus psychological pain, utterly unlike anything in the normal human experience. I said earlier, perversion of nature. My nervous system before was totally, adjusted to nature, and now it's the opposite. And it just feels so constantly, artificially, horrifically, just indescribibly horrible.
What do you do during your waking hours? You suffer a lot. You're in a lot of pain. How do you distract yourself? How do you make it through a day when this is what's going on?
Yeah. It's hard to sugarcoat it. I mean, the limitations that this imposes on your life are just so enormous. I walk a lot. I walk
15 miles sometimes.
Yeah, it's like 15 or it's like anywhere from 10 to 25 miles a day, really. Not because I want to. Okay. It's just necessary.
Hours and hours. Most hours are spent walking the entire town.
Yeah, and if we, like I said, if we didn't live, very close to a small, quiet downtown area, I would have absolutely no life. I mean, there are some days where I can drive the 5 minutes to the grocery store. All of the joy and freedom involved with driving, and I can't go far. It's like the farther I go, the more input to the nervous system it is. It's like almost like having a shock collar on inside of a geofence. Like, dogs have like those fences. It's a bit like that. It's like I can't go farther than I can go on any given day. I have an electric bike with throttle. There's really severe issues with exertion and heat intolerance because of this. I have to like make the upstairs here 60 degrees to even be able to attempt sleeping. It's didn't used to be that way. So there's serious reactivity to heat. There's also serious chemical reactivity. Things like detergents and perfumes, and like when my best friend and I first made it back to Oregon after being in LA, we were looking for some place to just live temporarily, like an apartment. All of the apartments we visited, or most of them, were new and were like off-gassing, just because of all the adhesives and new composite woods and things. Chemical reactivity was something before this that I thought was totally hokey and just like always rolled my eyes at. And this has just ignited massive chemical reactivity. Things like smells, even some natural smells, are just so offensive. It's just the things that are an insult to a normal person's nervous system. That threshold is just lowered to basically nothing with an injury like this.
Marchello, aside from your mom and dad, who else do you interact with while you're this sick? Do you maintain contact with friends, wider family? What are your relationships like?
Yeah, I like to say I lost the relationships that I needed to lose, and my closest relationships are just strengthened to a degree that I never could have imagined possible. My closest friend, my best friend, my soulmate, if I didn't have her, I don't know what I would do. I mean, she's just been like right there the whole time and always validating, always trying to understand, always researching. I'm fully aware that so many people don't have that. And my God, to have to go through this without someone like that, I physically can't imagine it. I think our relationship has strengthened. It, obviously it's incredibly straining. But it's all, it's difficult to feel love in the same way that I did before. Basically everything gentle and just pure and comfortable and cozy in life is out the window in this.
It's painful. It's actually painful. There are times when I'll try to massage his shoulders as I used to.
It's just confused. It's confusing because it's none of the same inputs register the same way. Everything is torture.
Music is cacophony now. He loved music. It was everything to him. He can't listen to music. He can't follow a story or a movie.
Yeah, music is a big one. Losing music for me. I mean, I was someone who listened to every genre of music under the sun constantly. So, to lose music and to lose driving and to lose hiking and
The stars.
photography and the ability to be out under the night sky and feel centered and grounded and peaceful in your body.
I'm going to jump in here for just say one thing. I'll try to say it without crying. I have never known anyone in my life who has a greater appreciation for life. The little things, a meal. He's a cook, the garden, the stars. I've never known anyone to appreciate things with the depth that he appreciated things as a child, as a teenager, and before this happened. And now what he lives with, it's as if life itself turned on him. He can still see the stars, but he can't feel the wonder. He can't feel.
And there's I can kind of give an example with music. I try sometimes to listen to music like in a really good window or something. And it's almost like trying to connect with anything from your previous life, because there is absolutely life before and after this. Even people that have temporary injuries or people that, experience akathisia and heal, there's before and after akathisia, there's before and after this injury. Trying to connect with former memories and, music from my life before, it's just excruciatingly painful. I try sometimes to listen to music and it just it almost sounds like everything sounds like heavy metal and not in a good way. The desire is there, the desire to go, one of my biggest passions was photography, and to feel like I may not get to make my best photos is excruciating in a way that I can't explain. There's loss that's just unquantifiably huge in this. I haven't had any indication. No indication has been given to me that anything will return. It's 5 years and really there's no improvement. It's just compounding and becoming more and more impossible and exhausting. And
Marchello, what do you say to yourself to stay hopeful? Because I'm sure you've heard things before. Oh, should be gone by the end of this year. Most people are better in 2 years. It's really unusual for it to go on this long. So as you move through these checkpoints and you hear these things and it's still really bad, what's that like for you? How do you speak to yourself to keep on going in the hope that things will turn?
To be completely honest, with me, it's more just fear of death and also not wanting to give the pharmaceutical industries this victory. It's my feeling that some really core people in the pharmaceutical industry understand exactly what this is, exactly how severe it is, how damaging it can be. I haven't really touched on suicidality in this. I recoil in disgust when I hear people say, he or she committed suicide in this, because at no point in this is it ever suicide to me. I mean, there is not a suicidal bone in my body, yet it's like suppressing a biological impulse, like vomiting, it's as powerful as absolutely anything can be. The suicidal urge that comes with this. So up until now, truthfully, I've been waiting for someone like you to come along. I think the kind of next generation of psychiatrists like yourself with fresh perspectives and open-mindedness is really going to help to further informed consent. Most of the older psychiatrists who we visited are just really kind of stuck in their ways and rely on their training, which we know is basically all just, funded by the pharmaceutical industry. So this is the kind of stuff that gives me hope and kind of gives me a rope to pull myself along. Just the getting to warn people and get the word out about this. It's not so much that I'm like, I have like a mantra or anything. It has been watching these timelines and listening to what others have to say. Oh, it'll be 2 years and you might see some improvement there. Usually some people see it at 3 years here, some people 5. All of those have come to pass. So at this point, it's this kind of stuff that keeps me going, and knowing that there's kind of like a change in the collective consciousness. Mm-hmm. We're talking just recently about all the Boeing stuff with Boeing whistleblowers, and so I think people are really kind of starting to understand, question, but also have a healthy amount of skepticism in multi-billion-dollar industries that make, in this case, $20,000+ a second on psych meds. I think that's changing in the zeitgeist, and folks like you are coming along and offering this platform for people to share stories, which, if it weren't for the internet and Zoom, I would have no way to, get the word out. If she wasn't a playwright, we'd be struggling there.
If it's okay, Marchello, I'd like to bring your mom into this. I want to get her perspective on a few things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're going to go back a little bit because I want to ask you, what was it like for you when you finally realized what Marchello was dealing with?
I remember reaching a point of having to make a decision. Can I say anything about some things in LA, or yeah, is that okay? He was, can I say UCLA? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's part of it.
Okay. Cause he was in, UCLA for 5 days because, a psychiatrist that he was seeing, felt he was at risk of suicide. And then he was in another place. They found one place that would take him without medication.
Into the framework.
And Marchello ran. And he ran because actually they said they would take him, but with his non-24, he couldn't go to the group meetings.
It's just, it's a story that's been told 100 times by people who are basically just thrown into, a facility like this because no one knows what to do.
So
I couldn't adhere to anything.
He just couldn't.
It was totally, I knew it was completely inappropriate.
But they were going to send him back to UCLA to force medicate him. And that's when he left and went to Oregon. He somehow, for his survival, he got on a plane and went to Oregon. And the people called me, and the people from this second institution called and said, don't worry, we can get an intervention to bring him back. They know someone who will go to Oregon and put him on a plane and get him back. And what I remember then and there was I had a decision to make. I was either going to believe the narrative that he was somatic, he was severe OCD, and needed medication, or I was going to allow my son, who was over 21 at this time, to make his own decision. Because I felt at this point, he'd never hurt anyone. He was not psychotic. He knew the difference between reality And he wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't a danger. And I felt that to rob a person of their own will in terms of, just medicating someone into oblivion was about the worst thing you could do. It's what separates us from, I thought about our dog a lot at the time, that he had when you're a human being, you have a right to make a decision. His decisions were not hurting anyone. And so to rob him of that most basic decision, was to rob him of his humanity. Maybe he wouldn't make the best decision. Maybe he'd make the perfect decision, but it was his decision to make. That's what makes him human. He has the right to decide about his life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me. I don't always agree, but what do I know? I am not in his body. And so what it's like for me is constantly an effort to listen more than to try to fix. Because I don't know how to fix this. And, on every level, it has changed our lives in ways, I'm speaking for my husband as well, that you don't ever imagine. What is it like? I don't know if you have children, but okay, you ask what he does in a day. There are many days when he screams for 5 hours. And there are many days that he weeps for 5 hours. And it is like your child is being tortured in the next room, really tortured, and you can't do a thing. I can't even get into that room, And
I'll just add that externally, there's a lot, I would say 90% of this is like tip of the iceberg scenario where outwardly from an onlooker's perspective, what you see is definitely not, doesn't reflect how severe, plenty of people would, see me on a day where I'm kind of able to translate the akathisia into walking. It's a pretty tight knit community here. We run into people and they say, "Oh, great to see you out. Great to see you out." People that know of what's happening. It's never what it looks like, in this, the vast majority of the time I'm physically blocked from crying and screaming, just because of how much you have to hold it together for yourself in order to not just panic in one direction. So I guess I would say, for friends and family, for me at least, trust in this is almost more important than what love looks like traditionally. Just really believing what your loved one is saying about this, and really taking them at face value. I really can appreciate how a lot of this probably sounds like hyperbole. It's not. And, it's just the most vulnerable possible state to be in for this amount of time. There was another young man in another interview of yours who said something to the effect of, expand your horizons, open yourself up to being more tolerant, more patient than you've ever been in your entire life toward the person going through this. And it's really true.
Lisa, I wanted to follow up on what Marchello was saying. How do you and your husband, because to a lot of the listeners out here, they've got family members who are caring for them now. It's no surprise that it's really hard to be around people who are in substantial distress. It can feel overwhelming. what do you and your husband do? What do you say to yourselves to make sure that that your ship doesn't sink from all of the pain and the suffering? Tell me that story.
It's a very complicated story, and it's been a real process. I think it is very. There are times when I'm watching TV, and he'll come in huge distress. And do I turn off the TV? I often do, because the sound is disturbing. If I watch the TV and he's trying to make a meal, but he's crying or he's in distress,
in outward distress, I feel like I am the worst mother in the world. I also understand, the concept of putting on your oxygen, your own mask. I try to make a distinction that this is not my life. It's not what I am being. I'm not in this. I don't have this pain. And I do have the ability to take a walk and appreciate the way I used to. I do. And it doesn't help him if I let that go. It doesn't help him if I sink. What will I be able to give him? We have had, Marchello has his own relationship with this man, but Marchello has a doctor that he's had since he was a little boy, who used to spend an hour with him talking about the stars. He has Marchello is a pretty amazing astrophotographer. He's had shows of his work, and the doctor still has his work in his office. And I don't know what I would have personally done without him. He has kept my husband and I, he's held us. He has held us, and God knows he has held Marchello. He's Marcello's doctor still, although he's transitioning to be a researcher, but he always was there for him in these past 5 years that we've been back in Oregon, always researching. He had some family members with akathisia himself, so he never doubted him. And the kind of love that he has shown him, coming to the house many, many times, and the kind of care he has shown us, made me feel that you question God in this. How could there be a God that would allow someone to suffer like that? But we have the other side of people who are so loving throughout this, that we've had some grace. And so you say, how do I get through? I have enough grace in my life. Marcello's godparents, some very, very good friends, this doctor. And that's what gets you through. People who can't necessarily change the situation, but who can walk with you through it.
I often, in my work, because I work with a lot of people with akathisia, I'm constantly getting questions, when will it end? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? And over time, for a long time, I don't really know what to say, but I find myself saying something similar more and more frequently. Is I don't know what's going to happen, but what I can promise you is that whatever happens, I'll be there with you. and I'll be there with you to figure it out. And that's the one thing I can be sure of, that I will be there when things happen. Because that's all you can do, really, is promise that you'll be there. Mm-hmm. I want to ask, so Lisa, put yourself in the shoes of someone who may be 6 months into this as a caregiver. You know, their loved one has just been hurt and they're experiencing this all for the first time. If you were to speak to that person, what advice would you give them?
Follow their lead in terms of what they feel they can do or they want to do in terms of a treatment. Don't try to fix. Offer when you're asked to offer. I'm a researcher, and when he says we tried everything, we have tried everything. I mean, psychics, Tibetan monks, every kind of natural therapy. If I had it to do over again, I would have followed his lead more. I would have made fewer suggestions because for him, I don't know, it may be another person's loved one is asking for suggestions or to do asking the caregiver to do research. But I would say follow their lead, believe them, because a lot of people they're going to encounter, whether it's a psychiatrist or a friend. I remember a friend's mother said, that's a fake disease. I have a psychologist friend and she says that's a fake disease. I mean,
it boggles the mind.
It boggles the mind.
The mental gymnastics that people will do to try to discredit, just because it's wildly inconvenient to, hear this. And it's much, much easier to gaslight an individual into oblivion than it is to change your worldview,
yes,
or to change your opinion, or to even just simply hold two truths together, that some people feel they've been helped by these meds and clearly, people are killed by these meds or maimed or injured for a long time. Both are true. And, some people just cannot go there.
And, be flexible, because if this is his journey, the person next to him is going to go on a journey too,
And really I should add that really no two injuries are alike. And, I've tried things that have helped others and haven't helped me. So, it really is, these injuries they fall on a spectrum. It's not one size fits all. It's just approaching, things to try with, curiosity and just pulling through moment to moment.
Lisa, I know, you've written a play about this, and I was just hoping you could weave that into the story, how your experience with all of this led you to pursue this creative project, and then maybe also you could share, where it can be seen or anything like that. Yeah.
This is my way of coping. It always has been. I'm a writer. I feel like if I can wrest with a W some meaning from something, then I can deal with it. It's my way of dealing with it. It kept me, I've written about many things, and very often social issues or things that were boggling my mind or wrong that I felt I could right, at least on a stage, or that I could get people sitting together in the dark, contemplating an issue together. And that maybe, people will go out and they'll be talking about something in the parking lot after the show. In other words, that this is a way that I think the theater's a place where we can discuss issues that affect us as human beings, through a good story. There's so many questions that this poses between the pharmaceutical way and the natural way. Marchello describes akathisia, and you correct me if I say it wrong, Marchello. What he was studying in college was climate science and psychology. And he sees akathisia as climate change for the human organism, that we are not built to deal with these drugs that we're putting inside us. And so through the play, I can ask a question like that. Is that something we should look at? The other thing that I feel that we should look at, and I have, seen a scene about this in the play, is, are we medicating life itself? That's what happened to him as I saw it. He was 20, 21. He was asking the kind of questions that a young man should ask. Where do I fit in? Should I be in New York? Should I be in nature because nature is what calls me? These are, to me, normal life questions. Why are we pathologizing what could be an appropriate thing that you need to go through in life? I felt that during COVID, when the incidence of antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs shot up. Shouldn't we be worried? If you live in the projects and half the people on your hallway are dying of COVID, isn't it normal to feel a little anxious? When you're going through a divorce, do we really want to be medicating life? And to whose benefit is that? It's only to the benefit of the number one most profitable industry in our country, which is the pharmaceutical industry. So if I can, through a very good story, have people ask those questions, it's something I can do. I can't do a lot for him, but I think I've had 2 readings of this play, and the audience really wanted to talk afterwards. They really wanted to talk about their own frustrations with the medical system, their own questions about who do you believe in life? Do you believe your doctor? Do you believe the doctor? Do you believe the minister? Do you believe the president? Or do we have to wrestle with some things ourselves? That's part of being human. It's not fun, but if we would take it on, maybe some things would change. Otherwise we're just, pray for people who want to tell us what to do because it's easier. I hope I answered that question. I guess that's where I hope to, that something positive can come of the experience.
Okay. Marchello, back to you now. I feel like we've really, really covered your story pretty well. And so I want to turn it over to you, actually. Is there anything that we haven't covered or anything important that you'd like to talk about?
I think a lot about my generation and just the way that these medications have become so incredibly commonplace and so, people are so quick to them. I was. I think it's obvious that this is my greatest regret is, agreeing to take these medications, will always be my greatest regret. I was so close to self-actualizing on my own. I think if I had had another year of just working through stuff, just being honest with myself also I think is so important. I was not being honest with myself. I was trying to make my square self fit into a round hole. And really believe that part of informed consent is, giving people the information of what can happen in the worst of it. It's not saying, oh, there's this movement disorder, and there's a possibility of that happening. For me, informed consent looks like giving people the information of the worst of it, not to scare people, just to allow people to make the decision for themselves. Because if I had known that this was, we hear 5% on SSRIs, people can expect 5% of people can expect to know akathisia from an SSRI or some form of injury. That would have been enough for me. I took these meds because, as I understood it, there was basically no risk. I thought that I could try them, and if it went badly, I could get off of them and all would be well again. So I think packaging in the worst of what can happen, and also really letting people know that, unlike basically every other substance aside from poisons, sometimes all it takes is one dose of an SSRI. That's not common knowledge. Common knowledge is basically withdrawal, that there can be withdrawal. So I guess I would want people to know that. I would also really encourage people to, instead of treating these medications as first-line treatment, try everything else before this. Literally everything else. And really be honest and say, are there changes that I can make to my life? Can I make a location change? Can I sever a bad relationship? Can I dive into that hobby I've always wanted to dive into, but felt like I couldn't, or something? And obviously, people take these drugs at the worst periods of their life, and not everyone is basically just taking them for life stress, but really, really, really try everything before this, because the risk is high, and the risk with other things is not high. Try everything natural before this, and really be honest with yourself. If they're not just simple life changes that you can make to improve your situation in your life.
Well said. Well, Marchello, Lisa, I'd like to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. Marchello, I would want to hear from you again. And I say this to quite a few people. If a year goes by, if 2 years goes by, if anything changes in your condition, please reach out and we'll have you back on so we can see how you're going over time. I think to have you come back would be really useful. Yeah.
Thank you for this work. There's not many people doing what you're doing out there, and really kind of offering this town hall setting. And I think a lot more professionals are going to follow in your footsteps, and this is just contributing to such important awareness. And we just
allowed him to speak and given him a platform, and that means everything.
So thanks.
Thank you.